I just want people to take away one or two things and implement them into their, day-to-day life. And, I think our ability to share that is through food and by cooking delicious things. So, if people want to cook the way we do, you kind of have to start to live the way we're living.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Sustainability means different things to different people. The way they approach it can be in small baby steps or trying to take on the world. Some can be bullish about the messaging, others find a way to dig deeper, put their hands in the soil, challenge their own thinking and live and breathe a new way of approaching what it means to be more sustainable, especially when it comes to food and for our future generations. Matt Stone is one of Australia's most influential chefs and co-owner of Future Food Systems. Matt, how are you going?
I'm great, thanks, mate. Thanks for the kind words.
Well, you're a bit of a legend down under with everything that you've done in regards to sustainability, and very much looking forward to talking about Future Food Systems. I know you're currently on the banks of the Yarra, so there may be a few boats going past in the background. But tell us about how this all started with Future Food Systems.
Well, it's a pretty extreme experiment, really. We make it up as we go in a lot of aspects, but I guess it's a long-term collaboration between myself and Joost and Jo. So Joost and I have worked together on various projects all across Australia for around 12 years. Jo's been on the scene for the last 8 with us on this crazy journey, and I guess Future Food System was something that we'd always dreamed up, something that we imagined could be, a pinnacle for change, a catalyst to make people think differently. And luckily Federation Square partnered with us and gave us the space to put it.
Well, it's pretty extraordinary, and you're actually living there as well. What's it like living in Federation Square?
It's quite strange. Every now and then when I don't shut the curtain in the morning, you wake up and there's people kind of staring in at you. And I guess we've just kind of got used to it. We do split our time between our house in Northcote as well. Pickles, our little puppy, doesn't love being here so much. It's a bit busy. So, like that, when we're operating the restaurant, over the weekends and stuff, we stay. And then on our days off, we'll head back out to Northcote just to break it up. But we never, this was always meant to be just a house. And we were going to continue working at Oakridge and live here. But then obviously things got a bit weird last year and things changed. And, we just decided that we wanted to put all of our effort and time into making this the most amazing project we possibly could. And, just in our nature between Jo and I, the best way we can share this idea is through, a plate of food. So we turned it into a tiny restaurant.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to exploring what you're growing and serving there as well. But tell us about the early days and creating the structure and what you guys did.
Well, it's working with Joost is it's always challenging. It's always exciting, but he, like I mentioned earlier, he kind of makes it up as he goes as well with the building. Like, there wasn't really a project manager as such. So, it was kind of a lot of things were decided at the moment as it would be in a kitchen. So I guess kind of, in theory, a lot of the way it was put together is the way we still cook and operate the restaurant. So it was a pretty crazy journey. It took a lot longer for us to build the project due to, restrictions on how many people we could have on site. There was a few mistakes along the way, but, essentially it's a 3-story building that's 87 square meters on the ground, anchored down with 30 tons of soil. So it's a productive living, breathing building.
Wow. What was it like trying to pull that together, that sort of living, breathing building, and what sort of footprint is it making?
Well, so over 87 square meters, which is a really tiny sort of footprint. Going vertically sort of makes sense. So this idea could be adapted in any country in the world. It'd actually be really interesting to see the building's productivity in, say Southeast Asia and then, somewhere like Scandinavia, just to see the difference with climate and how that would affect things. Would be pretty cool. But yeah, it's a pretty wild building, and it's aesthetically really quite beautiful. And I think some of the feedback that we get that it's all a little bit overwhelming. There's so many elements here, like, every single piece of timber in this building we fell, and 2 macrocarpa trees, which is a cypress, and a sugar gum, really productive trees that farmers could be, generating other incomes from, if they're having a bad year with wheat or a bad year with livestock. So yeah, everything was milled ourselves and all cured in a solar kiln by Aramore Furniture in Ballarat. So, every single piece of this building has traceability. There's no FSC timber, there's no PVC glues or pipes, there's no glues. It's a natural building. And it was actually really quite phenomenal during the building process because it never felt like a building site. It always smelt natural and it always felt natural. And that was, a lot of comments we got back when we were showing people through the build, that it didn't feel like a building site because there's nothing toxic here. It's all natural.
Wow. Well, it's getting cold at the moment. How does the building operate in regards to insulation and keeping warmth?
Well, all of the building is insulated with Durapanel. So it's basically cladding that's made with straw. Byproduct from straw. You could argue it could be churned back into the ground, but if you compare it to chipboard or regular building cladding, most of it comes from China. It's imported. It's full of toxic bits and pieces, so it's a really natural sort of insulation, and it breathes with the building. So we've embedded biochar, so basically charred olive pips into the walls to take out carbon monoxide. And it kind of holds heat, it keeps things cool. So it's really, it's a really interesting material. It's mostly used in studios for sound, for when people are recording music. But, applying it into a house is a really nice thing to do. And then we have an amazing, all of the glass is made in the Dandenong Ranges, so local as well. And it's thermally broken. So basically, it's 2 sheets of glass with about 30 mil gap in between. So, once you seal up the building, it'll stay as warm as you want it to be, or it can stay as cool as you want it to be, but it's also really silent, which is quite important when you're in the middle of the city.
You mentioned about the productivity of the building. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Well, it's a really, the amount of food, we started documenting everything we were picking, and then we just got too busy and kind of lost track of it. But, it's really insane. Like, I picked about 3 kilos of tomatoes yesterday, and we're nearly in winter. Like, it's really phenomenal. Like, I'm looking at 3 cabbages right now, and you look at a cabbage, and these bloody little cabbages were one of the first things planted in November last year, and they're only just nearly ready. And then you kind of think about that, and you buy a cabbage in the supermarket, and it's like $2 or $3. And also in the beds that the cabbages are in, nothing else has really thrived around it because they take so much nutrients from the soil. And then we kind of value that as a really cheap product for some reason. So kind of when you watch how things grow and how productive they are, you kind of understand how broken our food system is. How can this, this little cabbage that I'm looking at now have been growing for, sort of 7-8 months, and it's such a cheap product. And then, then I don't know, it's just a really weird one. I think the most important way you could live sustainably is growing your own food. And for me, I kind of look at it from the other way. It's the most delicious food. And that's why I've found myself on this journey, is because the most sustainably produced food is always the most delicious food. And as a cook, it's my job to serve delicious food. So why wouldn't I, want to be around these ingredients? It's easy, I can just cut and serve. Like, I don't have to do anything.
You mentioned the tomatoes and the cabbages, but you also got that wall with the amazing fungus and mushrooms. And tell us about what you are growing on site, some of the really sort of out there things that you're doing.
Well, we have the mushroom, which is a really cool experiment, which we've there's up to 24 varieties of mushrooms that are going through that room.
Wow.
2 of them are native to Australia, which John, who is an amazing guy, he was a marine biologist and got fed up with basically, he kind of said that there's not really any way to fish sustainably anymore, and then there's so much bureaucracy around sustainable fishing, and that book that's just come out, Toxic, down in Tassie, it kind of sums it all up, and he got fed up with that, so he applied his smarts to mushroom cultivation, and he's cultivated 2 native Australian mushrooms that he found in the Dandenong Ranges, and then a bunch of other varieties as well. So it's a really productive room. We've had a lot of ups and downs with it, balancing it and keeping it sort of in the right environment, but it's we're churning out a huge amount of food from it. So it captures the steam from the shower, which pumps into it to create the humidity, and then the overflow from the hot water system goes in to make more humidity, and then fresh air as well. So it's it's been a really big experiment, but it's super cool, and it's right in the entrance of the building when you walk in. So it's one of the first things that you see, and it's for aesthetics, it's beautiful, but then it's also a really productive thing. And all of the mushrooms are grown on a mixture of coffee and sawdust from the building, from all of the milling of the timber, coffee that Yost has gathered from cafes around Melbourne. They get inoculated with the different mycelium, and then and they're all in old feta buckets. So Yossi, doing his flower runs and stuff through the years, just noticed that the back of a lot of cafes was full of these white plastic buckets that, that every restaurant has them. Salt comes in them, feta comes in them, and they were never really used for much. So, Yossi, being the creative genius that he is, has made something really beautiful from a bunch of crappy white buckets.
Well, most of us know about 8 varieties of mushrooms that you see in supermarkets or fruit and veg shops. Well, how different are the varieties that you have, and what's it been like cooking them?
It's super cool. Our one of the biggest issues we face is not having too many mushrooms in the menu, just because we have so many varieties. And from like, for example, like the oyster mushrooms, like gold ones, pink ones, blue ones. We developed a really cool method of just absolutely caning them in cast iron pans between 2, and like compressing them as they cook, and they kind of turn into a mushroom steak, which is super cool. And then we glaze that with a mushroom garum. So it's kind of like a soy sauce that we've made from mushroom trimmings, koji and salt. So that was kind of one application. But the only dish we've had on the menu the whole time is a mushroom skewer, which kind of changes as to what we have. But it's a really simple one. I think last night we had lion's mane, king oyster, and shiitakes that we put on a bay leaf skewer, glaze it with a mixture of some split pea miso and mushroom garum, and just barbecue it, serve it straight off the barbie, and it's just a really yummy little snack.
Vegetables aren't the only thing that you're growing on the premises. You've got insects and fish and all sorts of things. Tell us about the challenges in that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, so we've got what Yost calls the MCG, which is the Melbourne Cricket Ground. So we grow crickets, which is pretty cool. And they're super productive. They sort of in about 30 to 40 days can almost double in the volume. So they eat all of the veggie trimmings. Like I just fed them some offcuts, outer leaves of some broccolis that I just picked, and they sort of take all of the, it's things we could be using for sure. But if it's food for another food source, that's kind of cool. So yeah, the crickets are great. We make a cricket ball, which is kind of like a falafel with sprouted chickpeas that we grew on the roof, and classic kind of flavouring, some herbs, veggies, and spices. But with the crickets, we don't want to serve them for shock value. We want to serve them for the right reason. So instead of just serving fried crickets, which we do a few little fried ones as well, but incorporating it into a food with meaning rather than just to be get an Instagram photo, I think is pretty cool. And then we have barramundi growing downstairs, and balancing the aquaponics system was a really big one. It's a really hard thing, and I mean Jo sums it up really well. You can kind of smell and feel if everything's working, because if any of the systems are out of balance, you're so in tune with it that you notice. So it's been really interesting. Your other senses, other than just tasting and looking at things, have really become in tune with the house, which is, we had a lot of issues getting the aquaponics right at the start. We had a lot of, unfortunately, fatalities along the way, but it's, I think it's important to talk about that stuff because it's all a learning process. It's all a journey.
What have been some of the challenges on the way? You mentioned that it's really about problem solving and finding out and finding solutions on the way, and that's part of the journey that you're going on. What's been some of those that you can tell us about?
Well, definitely the aquaponics at the start was a huge challenge. We put the barramundi in our top system, and we just couldn't keep the water warm enough. They need to be around 29 degrees to be happy. And we're sort of at our power limits with the solar that we've been collecting, so we couldn't really bring in any heat pumps, and that's kind of counterintuitive to the whole idea of what we're trying to do here. So yeah, it was a pretty sad day when we came in, and it was before we'd actually moved into the building. I think I went out for lunch and I came just by the house just to check on things, and yeah, the fish weren't doing well, and it was a pretty sad night, to be honest. We lost a lot of fish. yeah, they ended up back in the gardens and we planted trees above them, so they're not gone completely to waste. But just watching it and feeling a little bit powerless as to what you can do because we just didn't have the answers. So, yeah, we've rectified that by building a second aquaponic system downstairs that is warmed by the excess heat coming off the water heater. And then we've put rainbow trout out the top, which are completely fine in cooler sort of environments. And they came in as fingerlings, so, the size of your pinky, and now they're about the size, they're about probably 15 centimetres in length.
Wow.
Which is super cool to see. And we've also got yabbies up in the top aquaponics as well.
As you mentioned at the top of the show, this has been some part of your life for a lot of your career. But has this experience changed your perceptions, or have you learnt new things in regards to sustainability on this journey?
I guess it's just really reassured what we've sort of started on and what is the future. There's a lot of talk about sustainability amongst chefs and restaurants, which is amazing, and no waste. But I think unless you do it, things won't change. Like when we opened Silo, what was that, maybe 8 years ago? Everyone told us it was impossible. You can't open a zero waste restaurant. And now globally, it's one of the most talked about things in restaurants is going to a zero waste system. So, I think the biggest effects of this building and this project will be seen in years to come. But I think now it'll be a lot faster because people are really into it and care about it. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's something that it's going to have a big impact for sure.
Well, as you mentioned, change is the hardest thing for most people to adapt to and to implement, particularly when they're trying to run a business and remain viable. But what's some of the things that you've been learning on the go with future food systems that could be easily implemented into restaurants?
Well, the biggest way to eliminate waste is don't let waste in. So, refusing to take, waxed boxes, just kind of looking at what is coming in is a really big start. I think eating seasonally is a huge one because, if you're eating, like, how many cafes have avocados on all year that have been trucked around all over the place in and out of cold store? Like, it's a much bigger effect than just, the skin and seed that are left over of these things. You got to look at it from a bigger point of view. And I think nothing's too small. Even if you start by growing a pot of parsley, on a balcony somewhere, and then you start to use that pot of parsley and you pick it and you eat it and it's delicious. It's never going to taste any better than when you pick and eat. And, you look at animals in the wild, they're not eating dead shit off the floor. They're eating stuff that's live from a plant. So, if you kind of mimic nature in a lot of ways, you can actually live a lot more sustainably. But most importantly, it's more delicious. So, grow a pot of parsley, and then in summer you might grow a pot of basil, and then you might put a tomato plant in. And it's kind of, nothing is too small. And once you start doing this, it kind of naturally just progresses and builds on it. So I think, just the smallest changes, even if it's as big as, this isn't anything new, but Jo and I have a thing that we'll never, if we can't sit down and have a coffee in a coffee shop, or if we don't have a cup with us, you just don't have a coffee. And that's a huge thing to just eliminate waste and just say no and stick to those sort of values and go, well, if I can't make 10 minutes to sit down and have a coffee, if I'm that much of a rush and I don't have a cup with me, too bad, you're not having a coffee. So just kind of sacrificing a few things along the way, but it actually has a big impact.
You just mentioned Jo Barrett, who is your partner in business and in life. What's it been like working together and experiencing this whole new future food systems and living there as well?
Yeah, look, it's there's no denying it's challenging, right? When you spend all of your time both personally and professionally together. But Jo has this amazing calmness about her. She kind of she's a deep thinker, and she looks at situations and she's definitely made me a better person and a better cook just with her sort of calmness, but also drive and ambition to be the best. And she really is, I think, in so many elements of what she does, she is an amazing person, an amazing human, but also a phenomenal cook. She going across, from pastry to savory, there's not much that she can't do, and she's very humble about it. But yeah, I think she's a very special person and a really sort of great person in my life because, I don't know, sometimes you just need to be brought down a peg or two and put back to reality. And yeah, I think Jo has this great ability to very calmly tell me to pull my head in at times in a really nice way. And yeah, it's pretty special what we have.
You originally didn't plan to have a restaurant in the site, but COVID wasn't a plan either. You were both working at Oak Ridge, and that time ended. Tell us about that period of time and sort of the impact it had on you and your role in hospitality.
Yeah, I mean, Oak Ridge was it ended up being 5 years we were there, which kind of flew by, but it was a sort of weird one. I kind of got questioned by a lot of colleagues as to how it would fit. It was quite a commercial, very architecturally designed sort of, it's a very great winery, but it's not really pushing the boundaries in terms of sustainability. It definitely changed a lot in our time there. We started cover cropping and doing other bits and pieces. But I think what happened at Oak Ridge is we were given a platform to do what we wanted to do, and the faith and backing of Tony and Alana, the owners, to invest in us to grow a garden and to have a greenhouse and to be able to sort of make up our own sort of journey there, which was an amazing opportunity. And it really, I have so much love and respect for them for giving us that chance. And it gave us the chance to, show you can make a localized cuisine really desirable. We only cook things from the Yarra Valley. We called it Yarra Valley cuisine. And I don't think anyone had ever really done that. People talked about cooking locally, but then they'd still serve some snapper from Queensland. It just didn't make sense to me to do that. So it was an amazing time. And by the end, our team was so strong and so tight. We didn't have very few chefs left once they were in with us. And yeah, it's just, I wish we had more space to have more of the team here with us now, but we still have Louise Daly, who she worked by my side for around 4 years at Oak Ridge, and she's now sort of our head chef here at the house. And she's an amazing cook. She has an amazing palate. We call her the Time Lord because she is constantly, even when I come to take this call, she's like, "How long are you going to be?" And I told her half an hour, but it's going to be an hour. But that's cool because I saw the look in her eye. But she just manages us really well, and she's an amazing colleague to have.
Well, let's look at what you're doing there. What's it been like creating a restaurant experience in the house and creating that menu? Tell us a bit about that.
Well, we wanted to make a cuisine out of this house that was, we want to call it the most exciting food in the world. And if you look on our Instagram, we don't really talk about, it's only food. There's so many other elements to this, which we kind of put in the story highlights, but it's all about the food, because if we're not making exciting, amazing, delicious food, this whole concept doesn't have any weight. So it's interesting. And from the first menu that we sort of proposed to what we're doing now is very different. We're kind of working off 1 induction stove, 2 domestic ovens and a barbecue. And we're only feeding 14 guests a night, but it's about sort of 8 to 10 courses, depending on the day. But there's literally 3 or 4 of us doing the whole thing. So we're cooking, we're cleaning, we're doing the laundry, we're folding the napkins, we are doing the harvesting and the gardening, we're planting. I've got 2 chooks that make a fucking mess every day, but they're really cute. So it's we end up spending about half an hour a day cleaning up after them. But I wouldn't have it any other way because they've become part of the family. So it's a really unique experience, and it's not really like a restaurant, and it's more of a dinner party at home, in an orchestrated sort of way. So it's really fun, and a lot of days we're just in the weeds, as the podcast says, and we have to push and rush. But then when guests come in and they have a nice time, and we share some drinks and cook them some food, and you go, well, this is really worth it.
What's some of the dishes that you can tell us about that you really love at the moment that you're cooking?
So the cricket balls, which I mentioned, are pretty fun. That's a nice little snack. What else? We do the sort of main course. We call it dinner at Yo's house, because Yosti always will make us this fermented rice risotto. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's absolutely terrible. He's sort of a bit all over the place with his cooking abilities. So we've done a sort of refined version of that with a bunch of different sprouted grains. We harvested a heap of corn last week, so we kind of enrich it with a corn puree. And because we don't have any fat as such, we don't have butter, cream, mascarpone. So to make a risotto style dish and make it unctuous and yummy was quite an achievement, I think. And so we use a puree of cashew nuts, a puree of leek, and a puree of sweet corn to give that sort of luscious texture. And it's all vegan, but it's just really delicious. So that's kind of sort of the mainish course, which is great. What else? at the moment, we picked a bunch of parsnips. So we're doing a little sort of semi-burnt glazed parsnip, honey, and walnut miso sort of side dish tonight, which will be pretty cool. We've got the chook, so we get a few eggs a day. So we're doing a chow and mushi, sort of steamed egg savoury custard that goes with the mushroom skewer. But we're flavouring that with a broth made of all of the offcuts and trimmings of the house, so yabby shells, the barramundi bones, but really pumping it up with a heap of white pepper, so you get this lovely warming sort of little cuddle on the inside. That's another one. And we actually grate wild mushrooms and some of the mushrooms from the mushroom on top of that, but we dry them by the sun. So, in Scandinavia, historically, they would forage wild mushrooms and dry them gill side up in the sun because it retains vitamin D. So you have this sort of vitamin D source that's delicious and nutritious in the middle of winter when you couldn't normally find it. So, we're implementing a lot of sort of proven primitive techniques into a new cuisine in a lot of ways.
Well, you're in Federation Square. What's the longevity of this project, and what are the plans moving forward?
It's the $1 million question. We might stay longer. Currently, we're here till June, but it's a really hard one because honestly, it's really hard to make it stack up financially for us at the moment. It's a crazy experiment. It's a passion project, but it's not really that sustainable in terms of finances to keep going the way we are. So yeah, we're kind of looking at a few ways around that. We'd love to be creating more content and sharing more of what we're doing rather than being stuck to the stove all day and tidying up and looking after everyone. So we're just kind of assessing how that looks and what is possible. It's to be honest, I thought we might have had a bit more of financial support from either tourism or the city of Melbourne, which we're working on. So yeah, it's kind of dependent on what sort of a situation we can come to with everyone. But we'd love to stay for another full year just to do a full season of cycle. And when we talk about the nutrient density of everything at the moment, we can get it all measured and stuff, but all of the soil has come from somewhere else. So if we had a full year, we could actually break down the compost here with new compost that we've generated from the building. So that would be the true representation of the possibilities.
What do you hope emerges from this experiment that you're currently doing?
I just want people to take away one or two things and implement them into their day-to-day life. And I think our ability to share that is through food and by cooking delicious things. So, if people want to cook the way we do, you kind of have to start to live the way we're living. So, yeah, even like I referenced earlier, just even if people come here, I'd love it, and start to grow a pot of parsley on their balcony. That's the first step. So I think it's, just people take away little bits and pieces and implement them into their current lives. And by no means do we think you should go and knock your house down and build a house like this. It's more about the idea, and you can retrofit current buildings to be sustainable and to be, a zero waste food system.
Well, Matt, hats off to what you, Joost and Jo are doing. It's incredibly inspiring and very, very important. I would have loved having you on Deep in the Weeds and love catching up with you as always. Mate, please keep in touch and we'll definitely catch up again soon.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And thanks. I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts, and it's been a really special thing through a really weird time. And I think you've given a platform for people to, share their feelings and share what they're going through. So thank you, mate.
Thanks, Matt. Catch up soon. This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.